This is the ultimate smartphone camera. It gives you many of the professional features that you wish you could have in a phone, including an optical telephoto lens, faster autofocus, and a bigger sensor that gives you better low light performance. Say hello to Sony's Xperia 1 Mark III. There are a bunch of cutting edge features in this phone that I'm sure other YouTubers are going to cover, but being a photographer myself, I wanted to take a deeper look into the cameras on this phone, so that's what we're gonna do today. Even though I make my living taking photos on professional cameras like the Sony Alpha 7R4 and the Alpha 1, the camera that I end up using the most on a day-to-day basis is the one that's actually found on my smartphone. I'm sure many of the photographers out there in my audience are probably the same, and maybe you're like me and you're wishing that you could get some of the features that you have on your professional camera to use on a smartphone. Sony heard those requests loud and clear. And a few years ago, the Sony Alpha team partnered up with the Xperia team to begin sharing their camera know-how to make some amazing hardware and software changes that really improve the experience of taking photos on a smartphone. Exploring the camera array on the Xperia 1 Mark III, you'll find a 16mm wide-angle lens that has an f2.2 aperture. Below that, you have a 24mm lens with an f1.7 aperture, and at the bottom, you've got something that you don't really see in other high-end smartphones. This is a 70mm lens with an f2.3 aperture and a 105mm f2.8 lens. So you get 4 focal lengths that really cover a wide spectrum of shooting situations that you might find yourself in, from shooting landscapes all the way to shooting tight portraits using that telephoto lens. The optics have also been calibrated by Carl Zeiss and also has their T-Star coating, which improves the contrast in your images by reducing reflections. All of these cameras give you a 12 megapixel resolution using Sony's Exmor RS sensors and Bion's X mobile engine, which are technologies that you'd find in their professional lineup of mirrorless cameras. And let me just say, the features are kind of insane. You get quick fire 20 frames per second bursts that you can use to capture fast action shots just like you'd find on the Sony Alpha 9. You also get real-time autofocus tracking, which allows you to get precise focus on moving subjects and track them as they move throughout the frame. Coming from the Alpha lineup of cameras, you also have real-time eye autofocus for humans and animals. Those of you out there who are shooting with an Alpha series camera, you probably already know how amazing this technology is, but for those who have never used it, the camera will actually find the eye of a human or animal within your composition, focus on it, and then track it as it moves around the frame. This was a feature that was one of the big game changers for me as a portrait photographer, and it's really cool to see that they've included it on this phone. Getting autofocus performance on a phone that has speeds that are 3 times faster than smartphone cameras with higher megapixel counts, listen, it isn't easy. It requires some pretty sophisticated technology to allow all of that to happen. In order to get these high-end autofocus features, the Xperia 1 Mark III has a 3D indirect time-of-flight sensor. Without getting too big brain on you with how this technology works, it basically allows the camera to calculate the distance between your camera and a 3-dimensional object. Combining that with the dual phase detect autofocus sensors, you can enjoy continuous, precise, and accurate autofocus in any shooting situations that you're going to find yourself in. Before we jump into the software side of things, I have to mention one of my favorite features on this phone, and it is so simple. I just wish like every smartphone had this. When you're wanting to take a photo on most smartphones, you usually have to tap the screen to take a photo. And if you're like me and you have some kind of screen protector on your phone, sometimes you press the photo button to take a photo and nothing happens. Photography is all about capturing that decisive moment. And when it happens, you want the camera to keep up and actually take the photo when you're ready and when you press that button. With that in mind, the Xperia 1 Mark III has a physical dedicated shutter button. Check this out. When you focus on a professional camera, you typically push the shutter button halfway to engage the autofocus, and then pressing the button down the rest of the way to actually take your photo. Now you have that same functionality on a phone. The shutter button has an embossed finish, so you can easily feel where the button is at. You can even use the volume buttons to zoom in and zoom out. These two features alone make taking photos feel more like what you might be used to using a pro camera. Okay, so great hardware needs great software in order to give you the best experience. You actually get two different camera modes that you can use to take photos. Like most other Android phones, you can use the basic mode, which gives you fast access to the basic features like adjusting your exposure, adjusting the bokeh effect, changing your drive mode, turning the flash off and on, changing your aspect ratio, and of course, adjusting your zoom levels. For those of you looking to professionally craft an image, you'll want to use the Photography Pro features. If you're a Sony camera shooter, the interface will probably look really familiar since it was actually inspired by the Alpha line. Using Photography Pro, you could shoot in auto or use familiar shooting modes like program, shutter priority, and of course, full manual control, which allows you to adjust your settings exactly the way you want. You can easily adjust your shutter speed, ISO, white balance, metering and drive modes, and a bunch of other features using an interface that looks like what you'd see in an Alpha camera. A huge benefit of Photography Pro is that you could shoot in a RAW format. If you've got a professional camera, you probably already know the benefits that shooting in RAW gives you, but for everyone else, taking photos in RAW gives you an image that has all of the original image data that's captured when you actually take that photo. You can then take that raw image into a program like Lightroom and have greater control to adjust the colors, the exposure, and pretty much everything else to get a much better image than what you would get if you were shooting in JPEG. You're able to do all of this while enjoying a 4K HDR OLED screen with 120 Hz refresh rate. This awesome screen displays more colors accurately, so when you want to physically show your photos to others, they can enjoy viewing your images in the way that you intended them to look. I'm going to do some more videos demonstrating professional techniques for shooting stills and video using smartphones, so be sure to like this video and subscribe to be notified when those videos go live. I've also got some additional details about the Xperia 1 Mark III in the description of this video. If you want to learn more about Xperia phones in general, check out the playlist that you see here on the screen, and I'll see you over there.